Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning into our second episode of Weather-Wise. I'm meteorologist Christine Gregory.
And I'm meteorologist Liam Healy.
We have a lot to talk about tonight with our second Weather-Wise topic, where we discuss what drives our day-to-day weather, where we take a bit of a step back from focusing on just one weather phenomenon.
Indeed we do, Christine, and we will break it all down for you real soon. In addition to our Weather-Wise topic of the week, we'll break down the latest weather highlights and debunk yet another weather myth. But first, we'll be answering your Twitter questions.
Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to your favorite source for becoming weather-wise. We're kicking things off with hashtag AskAmet.
Joining us on set is meteorologist Samantha Carlson. So, Samantha, what questions do you have for us tonight?
Okay, so our first question comes from Phoebes Murray on Instagram, and she asks, how come sometimes when it snows, the sun's still out, but it's bitter cold and nothing melts? Well, Phoebe, it all has to do with the angle of the sun in the sky. During our northern hemisphere, the Earth is tilted away from the sun, which means the sun rays isn't directly hitting the surface. It's not as intense. The sun's more sun gets reflected off. More sunlight gets reflected. The sun striking the ground heavily depends on the sun's angle in the sky, which is the sun is lower in the sky during the winter. The sun's rays distributing.
Speed up. What is that?
The same amount of...
distributing the same amount of energy, but over a larger area on the ground. So all in all, the intensity of the sun during the winter just isn't significant enough to melt the snow on the ground. Our second question comes from @TCWeather on Twitter, and he asks, what makes good sunsets? This also has to do with the sun's angle in the sky. Yeah, okay. This also has to do with the sun's angle in the sky. The sun is at its lowest point in the sky right around sunrise and sunset. At this point, the sun's rays has to pass through much more of the particles in the atmosphere, but it's actually clean air that helps produce more brilliant and beautiful sunsets. As the sun rises and sets in the sky, blue and violet light have shorter wavelengths and are most likely to be scattered by air and dust particles once the sun sets. Sunlight, yeah.
So that's pretty interesting, Sam. So what you're saying is that as all of these sunlight comes through the air, it starts to get more and more refracted through these cleaner air particles. So you're saying, so like a polluted day, we see less of a beautiful sunset, but those days where you have those clear air skies, and we're really going to see those nice, beautiful Oswego sunsets that we all know and love here down here at Oz.
Yes, we do.
And the whole thing with the snowmelt too. I mean, that explains a lot why everything doesn't. Oh, so coming up after the break, I'll be talking about your weather highlights coming up, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back from the break. It's time for Liam to break down this week's weather highlights. So, Liam, I heard it's been raining a lot in Europe.
Yeah, we got a lot of rain over in Europe. So really, all the way from Portugal through France and moving across the entire continent of Europe right now. You can see it spinning right here. This is a low pressure system that brought upwards of 6 inches of rain to areas from, like I said, from Portugal to Paris. Some areas of these received 6+ inches of rain. So as we really move through all this, you can see some more rain is definitely on the way for areas in lower southern France as well as Italy. And, really checking back at home, not seeing as much rain across the country. You see just a few spotty areas of rain up in Canada as well as across the Midwest. But really what we're watching here is in Denver, that Denver area. We're watching, once again, heavy snowfall beginning to fall across this entire area. What we're watching, up by buildings, especially across the entire spine of the Rockies, we're going to be watching for over a foot possible across this entire area as we move through the next couple days. So this is our futurecast. We're moving through Friday here. Most of the snow has stopped by now. It's really a big Wednesday night into Thursday afternoon event. So as we really check out here up by Billings, we're watching as lighter snowfall accumulations possible here, but just south of Denver, that's where we're seeing our heaviest snowfall potential for this entire storm. Really not, I mean, it's only about, looking at 6 to 12 inches, but we're really looking for those ski resorts to start opening up pretty early. We have a couple areas over here in the Northeast too. Whiteface Mountain already open from those early season snowfalls. These early season snowfalls are only going to help these western ski resorts get open even earlier. That means big business and some great vacations to plan. So as you check out some of these local conditions, we're looking at some rain over in the Midwest, but staying pretty dry across the entire Northeast. This is a high pressure that has settled in. We talked just about that a few minutes ago. We're actually going to be talking about it coming up in our weather-wise topic of the week. What exactly is a high pressure system? Really what it is bringing some clearer weather right now. We expect this to persist in the next couple days. A lot of this weather here is courtesy of Storm Team 10 lending us their weather graphics today. So as you check across, just clear skies. We'll be right back. You're watching Weather-Wise. Welcome back to Weather-Wise. It's time to break down our second Weather-Wise topic of the week.
Today, we're discussing what drives our day-to-day weather. The fact is, Liam, there are many factors that work together that help influence and drive our weather. Today, we're going to focus on just a few of what causes our weather to move and behave in the way that it does. Those all include ocean currents, global winds, and high and low pressure systems. Today, we are first starting with ocean currents. So, what is an ocean current? Well, by definition, it is a continuous directed movement of ocean water as a result of multiple forces. These all include wind, waves, temperature differences, the Coriolis effect, and a lot more. These currents play a key role in how the ocean distributes its energy all throughout the globe and heavily regulate climate patterns and daily weather phenomenon. So we're first going to start with the California current. This current moves southward from the northern Pacific down the east by California, and this current is a cold current. And a lot of what happens is upwelling pushes cooler water to the surface of the ocean right along the coast. This causes the air above it to cool and condense. This causes the air temperature to lower, the water vapor condenses, and this creates a lot of the fog that tends to occur along the western coasts of California all the way up to even Oregon and Washington. So a lot of their foggy weather that comes in is a result of this cold ocean current. Now we're going to jump all the way back to the Atlantic coast and talk about the Gulf Stream. This is a warmer ocean current that originates in the tropical Caribbean and travels up the eastern U.S. coast. And believe it or not, this warm ocean current keeps places such as the southeastern coast of Florida a lot cooler in the summertime and warmer in the winter. Of course, relatively speaking, cooler as in still seeing temperatures in the 80s, but it also helps to moderate the climate in northern Europe. So this current, you can see it moderates the British Isles too. This current is a warm current, and with the location of Europe in comparison to Canada, you would think that the climate is much cooler like it is in Canada, but it actually helps to moderate the climate, keeping things a lot warmer than it should be right along the British Isles and along Europe.
Yeah, so when we're talking about this warm current here, we're really watching the Arctic Circle is right around this area. So having an island this close, you would think that it'd be much cooler, but this North Atlantic drift really does help to moderate those temperatures. So another thing that we wanted to talk about is our wind currents across the entire global circulation. So there are several different groups that we mainly focus on. We have our westerlies, our northeast trade winds, our southeast trade winds, as well as our westerlies. So there's a separate set for each hemisphere. So generally what we tend to focus on when we're weather forecasting is our northern hemisphere winds. These southern hemisphere winds don't generally influence our weather too much. The biggest influence for us is the westerlies across the United States. This is what really helps our weather move west to east. Hence why they're called the westerlies, because they tend to blow in a westerly direction. Now they tend to blow, this isn't actually, so I want to make a point here, these aren't actual winds. These are just general wind circulations that are caused by the Coriolis effect. So it's one of the forces on our planet that help to bend the winds on a 90-degree angle from the direction they're blowing due to the spherical shape of the Earth, as well as the rotational velocity of the Earth. So you remember, we are spinning in space. So that's what really helps to create these global wind patterns that we're seeing here with the westerlies. So that really helps our weather move west to east. But we see a lot of stuff with our hurricanes. Why do hurricanes move west to or east to west along the southern part of the globe? That's a really big question that a lot of people tend to ask. So why do they do it? It's because of our northeast trade winds. So these are the ones you heard a lot about that Columbus took across the ocean blue down in 1492. These are the winds that he rode. So that's a pretty, so that's why our hurricanes will move from east to west. We're going to see these northeasterly winds. It's going to blow them from over here. Generally they form off of Cape Verde, depending on the time of year. And then it's going to swing across the Caribbean here. So that's really one of the interesting facts about how our global wind circulations tend to influence our weather across the United States and in the entire hemisphere itself. So an interesting fact actually is that these the 30-degree latitude helps us to it doesn't actually help us to, but it is an interesting thing. It's called the horse latitudes because that's where a lot of ships tended to get stuck, in that area between those two global wind circulations. I'm not going to tell you why they call them the horse latitudes. It's not pretty, but you know, you had to do what you had to do when you're locked out in the ocean. So another really big weather influencer across the United States is our jet streams. These are directly influenced by our global wind circulations, but this is a more localized effect. They tend to be 5 to 10 miles above the surface of the Earth. So they tend to reach these extremely fast wind speeds of 200 plus miles an hour. How you may ask that you can see these winds get that high? There's no friction up there, so you're not really worrying about them rubbing against the ground and getting slowed down by friction. So a really interesting thing that a lot of people might not know is that there's 2 different jet streams across the entire United States. We have a polar jet stream, which tends to stay about 6 miles above the surface, and that's an average that we usually use, just as a rule of thumb. So these are generally by 60 degrees latitude, which is right on our Arctic Circle line. So, and then we also have a subtropical jet stream, where it's about 8.5 miles above the surface. It's a bit warmer air, so it's easier for it to rise up a bit higher. And it's usually generally around our 30-degree latitude line, so not too far from the Tropic of Capricorn here in the northern hemisphere. So, and really, whenever you hear a storm moving across the United States, this is what's moving it. These 2 jet streams are what's going to be moving your weather across the entire United States. They're one of our biggest weather drivers. Christine, what else? What are we moving across the United States here?
Well, what's actually moving across the United States? Well, we have different high and low pressure systems. You hear TV meteorologists all the time talk about these high and low pressures, but what do they actually mean in terms of our weather? So first we'll talk about our high pressure. These systems usually produce clear skies and more stable weather. So when you have a high pressure system, typically the air is sinking and warming. That's producing warmer temperatures and calm, dry conditions. You can see the air circulates clockwise around it and exits out of the high pressure system. So now we'll start with low pressure systems. Well, these are typically associated with your unstable weather, like rain or storms, typically associated with your warm and cold fronts. You can't see them here, but they're usually associated with them. So usually low pressure systems are rotating counterclockwise with winds going inside of it. And again, these high and low pressure systems usually travel from the west coast to the east coast, and that is what brings our weather that you see every day, like the rain you see that the low pressure system usually brings to the eastern coast. So coming up after the break, we will be tackling a common sailor's myth.
Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Welcome back for our last discussion, which is one of my favorite things to talk about, called Weather Myths Debunked.
And joining us at the desk once again is Samantha Carlson. So let's jump right in with it.
All right, so who here has ever heard of the old saying, red sky at night, sailors delight, and red sky in the morning, sailors take warning?
You know, I've always heard it. I grew up, maybe I grew up in a fishing village, but I was Irish. We were a lot of sailing back in the day, so it is something we always pass down. It's one of those little adages you get from your parents or whatever. Mm-hmm. Sam, you ever hear of it?
Yeah, my parents were big on weather, so they always would have like these little sayings to go along with it to help me remember.
All right, so this old wives' tale actually to some extent holds true, but it doesn't tell the whole story every time. So a little bit about the history of this weather folklore. So weather lore has been around for ages, really ever since people were predicting the weather. A lot of sailors and farmers relied on this to plan out their daily activities, navigate ships, and plant crops as well. So first, let's focus on the color that you see in the sky and how the weather affects it. So the colors we see in the sky are due to rays of light that are being split into various colors on the spectrum. And the amount of water vapor and dust particles in the air ultimately affect what colors are shown as the light passes through these particles. And we see the red during sunrise and sunset as light passes through the thickest part of the atmosphere. This could be an indication of certain particles in the sky that then potentially translate to what weather is coming our way.
So red at night, when we see a red sky at night, it means that the sun's light is passing through a higher concentration of dust particles as the sun is setting, usually indicating that high pressure or more stable air is coming from the west. That generally means good weather is to follow. When you have red in the morning, when the sky is red in the morning, it could mean a high pressure has already left and moved out to the east. An area of low pressure, maybe stormy or rainy weather, is possibly moving into the area. The deep fiery red in the morning sky can indicate a higher moisture content in the atmosphere. Again, once again indicating rain could possibly be on the way.
I know that was a lot to take in, but that was actually really interesting. You know, all that goes into seeing that color that you see in the sunsets.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've been out stuck on a boat in a stormy weather. It is not good, so it's definitely, maybe I should have looked at the sky before I went out that day.
Yeah,
definitely a poor decision on my end. Sam, you ever see the red sky in the morning? Does it ever influence what you're wearing that day, or?
Sometimes it does. It usually just go with like what the outfit I picked out the night before, but it definitely does help.
Yeah, a lot of these little weather tidbits and little weather tricks. There's a lot of them out there. Like, you guys ever hear the woolly, what is it called? Caterpillar. The woolly caterpillar forecasting New York's weather.
I've
That's
never
a
heard
new
of
one.
this.
Yes, some people believe that this caterpillar, depending on what color the fur is, can predict if we're going to have a bad winter or not.
That's insane.
Maybe we'll cover that in a future Weather Myths Debunked coming up
Maybe
in a few
we will.
weeks.
I'm curious.
That's an interesting.
I think we should.
We'll be right back. Coming up after the break, we'll have one final look at the weather with meteorologist Christine Gregory.
Welcome back, and I'm here, meteorologist Christine Gregory, to give you one final checkup with your local weather. So, over the past couple of days, I know yesterday we saw quite a bit of rainfall in the area, over half of inch, which was above the record for the month, and quite contrast to what we've been seeing today. Our satellite and radar showing mostly quiet conditions. We are seeing some rain signatures across the lake, maybe some lake effect rain showers, some clouds, upper level clouds in the area, but other than that, we've been mostly dry. We should be seeing that heading into the week. Temperature-wise, we're seeing mid-50s, some spots even seeing 40s, like up and down in Harrisburg. Here in Oswego, we're at 55. Syracuse, a little bit cooler, seeing 51. So temperatures are starting to cool down from today. For your futurecast planning out the rest of your afternoon and evening, you can see by tonight we'll have temperatures dropping into the 40s. We'll be seeing more in the way of clear skies as we do have high pressure moving into the area. For tomorrow morning, you can see we do have some clouds starting to move into the area with some rain showers, but those are mainly going to be north of our area. I think if we do see any rain, that's going to be mainly a sprinkle or two in the afternoon, but as the evening and the afternoon progress, you see temperatures hanging into the 50s, mostly in the way of dry conditions. And into Friday morning, this is when we're going to have a lot more cloud cover in our area, temperatures in the 40s, and a lot more cooler conditions on the way for your weekend. So to recap for tonight, you can expect to be mostly clear with temperatures pretty chilly in the 40s. So I think definitely, if you are heading out tonight, grab that jacket as we are seeing a little bit more cooler temperatures. And if you are heading out the door tomorrow morning, again, we are going to be mostly dry, temperatures in the 50s, similar to what we've been seeing today, but those temperatures shoot up to maybe even hitting 60 degrees by your 3 o'clock hour. We are mainly dry and cooler, and we will be right back with your final check at the desk. We will be right back.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We'll see you once again next week, where we'll continue to make you weather-wise. Have a great night.